Good morning. We're still working a little bit on getting everything settled here in the new, well, actually old way of putting the hall together on Sundays. And I apologize for those of you who it's difficult to hear. Sometimes we've been able to have a speaker and sometimes not. The technology is a little bit iffy. So if you're out here and you can't hear very well, please try to mediate your safety and the doorways together. We'll do the best we can. And thank you, Sai, for keeping that all going. He's been putting in a lot of work to do some rearranging. And I do encourage people, particularly if you're listening to this through the live stream, if there's anything that would make your experience more helpful, please send an email to office@buddhai.org, and it helps us to make some adjustments as we're going along. So many years ago, over 1,000 years ago, there was a master, Zen master named Jizo. And there was a novice who visited him whose name was Hogen. And when Hogen came to visit Master Jizo asked him, "Where have you come from? Or where have you been traveling?" And Hogen said, "I've been on pilgrimage." And Jizo said, What's the point of your pilgrimage?" And Hogen said, "I don't know." And the Master Jizo said, "Not knowing, how intimate." And it said at this point that Hogen was enlightened. Always a good ending. Yeah, if you read the commentary, always the first line is Hogen may have something like, in every koan, something like Hogen may have seen through a keyhole into the vast ocean of thusness. It will take him at least 30 years to have any standing at all. Usually is some kind of clarification of the enlightenment there. For the past few weeks, I have been with my mother, and she's ill. And we don't know what will happen. And this is very intimate. Sometimes when we think about this word intimacy, we use a lot in the Zen school. But we may have the sense that this word intimate always is going to feel like a warm hug. But that isn't the case. Actually, intimacy can be deeply frightening. It can be disturbing, but is always inviting if we learn to hear in that way, or we learn to pay attention in that way. The word intimate here in the koan is not the character that we usually translate as intimate. In the Chinese characters, the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese characters is shinsetsu, which in colloquial Japanese means something like kindness. But in this case, the shinsetsu means close. Sometimes the translation of this koan, they will say it's nearby or it's very close. But that character that means close means parent. The word in Japanese is oya. It means that being, those beings that your flesh and blood is completely intertwined with. And so I know that for many people, their relationship with their parents is complicated. And I'm no exception, although mine's not so complicated. Actually, very close and loving. And so I feel lucky to be able to be close with my family and close with my mother, particularly as this difficulty is unfolding. She's at Oregon Health Sciences University. Is that what OHSU stands for? Yeah, crazy hospital. I've been up there. It's like a spaceship, and receiving very good care. So we feel good about that. But in the ICU for about 8 days, and now she's very stable. So so that's good. Anyway, I picked this koan on Friday when I was sending out the digest, and I thought, oh, surely I'll think of something to say. And then this morning I thought, it says not knowing is most intimate, so I should not know what I'm going to talk about. And so I have come to you prepared with nothing other than the fullness of my heart and willingness to engage in the Dharma. So I'm not feeling particularly fragile. Any kind of question that is on your mind about the Dharma or about life, I would be willing to spend some time exploring together. I. Would you share about your mother? Sure. If you were going to write a comic book and you wanted to have the, what's one of the things that's great about comics is you have to communicate a lot of information with a small amount of visual information, right? Like that's kind of one of the genius of comic books, I think. The style of drawing, you create. There's a lot of information in there, but you can't just explain everything. And if you have too much words, like in a novel or something, those thought bubbles, like they take up the whole page and it's not a comic anymore. So if you were going to write a comic, my mom would be the perfect comic she'd be the perfect person for the like loving mother character. Yeah. Just absolutely present in the very simplest way possible, just staying there by your side and making sure you're okay. And she hates to cook. And she's not that fond of eating either. So she doesn't have all those kind of stereotypical, like, go home and eat your mom's this or that, or those sorts of things. But the kindness of her heart. She raised, more or less, she was very involved in raising her 7 younger brothers and sisters. Working class family from the cornfields of Ohio, kind of day to day making it. And so both of her parents were always working, and she was the one that took care. And she and my father met. It was a small town, and my dad was Catholic. So what happens in these small towns in the Midwest is you go to school with the same kids, like from kindergarten, right? So I'm in this class. There's like 30 people. I've known them since they're 5. And so there's no prospects for dating. But the important thing would happen is the freshman year of high school, the Catholic kids, which there'd be a class of like 8, would come over and join the high school because the Catholic school only went through junior high. So my dad showed up. Apparently he was, pretty good looking, and kind of, fun. So she took a liking to him, and they got married, and then they escaped to Oregon when I was 4. So I'm the third of 3 sons, and I think if we had stayed in Ohio, her life would have been very hard. But we came here, and she loved the flowers and the birds and the simplicity of the life in the Northwest. And she worked, raising us. And like I said, she was just fabulously present. And she started to work once I entered grade school. And she worked at the grade school that I went to, which really was not so much fun. I mean, it was great because I could like forget my lunch money. I could go get it from mom or whatever. But if I ever got in trouble, it was horrible. They would say, "What would your mother think?" And I would just think, "I don't care what my mother would think." But she started to work helping in the kindergarten class, and then in special needs class, and then pretty soon she went into secretary for administration, and then she entered working for the legislature, and then she worked for Governor Kitzhopper for many years. She was the secretary to the governor's kind of right-hand person. I forget the name of that position. So, she kind of rose in her work to more prestige. I don't know that it was better work, but it was maybe more prestigious work. And yeah, I've been really appreciating spending time with her in the hospital. And I think our character becomes clearer as we become weaker. When you can kind of take care of business, you can kind of shine on parts of your character, through your strength. Like, well, I'm weak there, I'll shore it up a little bit. And as you become weaker, you become less capable of that. And what's underneath, what's the real fiber of your being starts to come forward. And, with her, it's a lot of sweetness. So, when you're in this kind of care facility, when our daughter Satsuki was at Dornbecker for 6 months, I also was blown away just on a daily basis, the level of care that the people in those professions are bringing forward. I mean, it brings me to tears many times in a day by the level of clarity that they bring to their work. And one of our daughters is a nurse, and I know there's a whole backside to it, I totally get that. But what is there not a backside to? If there's no backside to something, be suspicious of it. Because there is a backside. You just can't see it, or you were not willing to see it. But they just bring their heart there fully. And my mom's capacity to receive that is really humbling. And I wasn't sure, would she be willing to bother people? Because she's so sweet and kind. Like, will she be willing to push the button? Like, I stayed with her most nights, my brother some nights, and me some nights, and we stay there, 24/7 with her. And I was kind of worried, like, she's not going to press the button. She just doesn't want to bother people. That's kind of how she is. No problem. She's pressed the button. They said, "What do you want?" She's like, "Would you send the nurse, please?" And the nurse will come in, and then, she'll just tell them what she wants. Very willing and very able to see other people's strength and the offering of their strength, and then to accept it and to rely on that. So it's a big learning for me.
There you go.
Hi.
So, my mom passed a couple months ago,
Yeah.
and as you're talking about the story, about intimacy and about the fear of intimacy.
Yeah.
And then the story about how he didn't have to prepare, or there was nothing. So as I'm moving that, and that's how I feel right now, right?
Yeah.
There's like I can't put together something.
Yeah.
Like to fill that void.
Yeah.
And but the fear and then also the joy of that, of the love for my mom.
Yeah.
I find that moving in the world right now is really, really hard. And I can't force feeling stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't really have nothing. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But I just, but I know as I move along and I'm grateful for my life, I'm also pushing away from everything, and I can't help it. So I'm like in this weird area,
Yeah.
And it really is awesomely sucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesomely sucks.
Yeah.
Just don't know, like, it's hard in practice and just living, not knowing, but then also still moving.
Yeah.
And, just confused.
Yeah. So let me give you two sides to some advice. One is particularly through grieving, we're taught something very important. And we're taught many important things, but one of the important things that we're taught is that it is necessary to find our own place. We're so drawn out into the world, all of these relationships we have with things that are kind of outside of us. And that's not bad, but it has the tendency to make us disconnected from our own chamber, our own place, our own being. And so particularly in grief, there's a reason that people would like wear black, not, you don't go to any festivals. That wasn't just because you're supposed to make your life suffering or something, make it hard. It's because it was supposed to create the environment in which you could reconnect with that place, which is so easy to lose because you're doing things in the world. So that part of you that's like pushing things away, there's probably a side to it that's unhealthy. That's a safe bet because almost anything we do has a side that's unhealthy. But there's probably another side which is really important. Like, you need your own place. And grief will drive us there. And it's a great teacher that way. So finding your own aloneness, because that's part of what, when we lose someone, there's a loss and there's an aloneness. Even though we have other friends, we have other family, we have everything, now there's an aloneness, which is really central to our life actually all the time, but we don't know how to be with it. So that's the first side, you know. And the second side, I'd say, is that the other thing that deep intimacy and love does for us is it helps us see that things are not just what I think they are. They're not just like a solid thing that I can say, oh, that's a kotsu, and just like dismiss it. We know that the thing is a gateway. We know that there's a transparency, that there is an invitation. So like with your mom, you know that although there's a hole there in one sense, there's also this gateway. There's an invitation. And that invitation's always been there. And your love brings you to the precipice of that. It brings you to the gateway of that. And so while you care for the chamber, while you care for knowing your own place, there's also this. There's like a doorway that opens up into, if you know it, you won't be able to walk through. But if you have the, you know, in a way, the grief gives you the bravery because you don't have a choice, right? You to release into that gateway that is a mysterious a gateway. But we can only really know that gateway if we take care of being where we're supposed to be. So I think all of us, when we reach difficulty in general, but particularly grief through loss, those two things are hard to harmonize, and it's confusing, and you're going to get hard licks on both sides of them. But if you come back to that bit, kind of the simple thing is there's a gateway there, and if you make offerings to it, you just keep coming back and back, even when it's difficult to do. You know how to be with it, but you take some time to figure it out. Yeah. Hi.
I have a picture of my mother in the Zendo and family. Different shots of it. But I light incense to her every day because she was an alcoholic. And we treated her awfully. We treated her terribly. And I said, Mom, I stopped. For us. You know,
Yeah.
because 4 days, I think it was 4 days? Right before I went into the AA,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I hadn't planned to. I just felt I owed it to her, and I slept in her bed where she died. And I used a different incense than I used for the Buddha and for the Buddha Shobra.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really important, and it's in the family. And I think I discovered that diseases like addiction run in families, and they're passed on.
Yeah.
And so I will say every day, Mom, I stopped. I stopped for us. I stopped for you.
Beautiful. In a very traditional saying, when someone was ordained as a renunciate, as a monk, they will say that for 8 generations before your ancestors are liberated. Now, in that time when people would say that, that's the only way they really had to understand what it meant to be a follower of the Buddha's way. If you were going to follow the Buddha's way, basically you became a monk. If you weren't going to do that, you could support the monks, but that was about it. So this is true for all of us. It's not just true for monks. When we are initiated to the path, whether that happens in a formal way or an informal way, that when we walk on the path of awakening, there is an undoing of karma that is not just our own. And the intimacy of our family is one of the profound places in which the karma can be rearranged. And we don't, it defies our normal way of understanding things. We say, how could my mom stop drinking? She already died, right? And she wasn't able to, but I did. But that's not the case, right? Actually, when you stopped, she stopped. And her mom, her dad stopped. Her brothers and sisters stopped. So there is a way in which karma is undone that is a mystery to us, but it happens in the intimacy of that place. And this is one of the reasons for those of you who are lucky enough to have relationships with your parents. For some people, it's impossible, either because their parents aren't around or because the relationship's just too difficult. But when you can have a relationship with your parent, you get to see something of that karmic unfolding that you're imprinted with deeply by your kind of birthright. And I think it's so wonderful. And in a way, we could say it's like seeing the weakness of our parents, like the places that they did things that we could do better. But that's not just for us, it's also for them. And it's just like, I think it's just a miracle, really. Hi.
Not intimacy, not knowing, and that aloneness that we carry with us. And we want intimacy to mean oneness, but really it's too close together. And the big moments and the difficult moments in relationships where I found that intimacy was really deepened is when I had to bring my whole heart and self with no manipulation,
Yeah.
with no knowing what's going to happen. You really have to lay it out there, and it brings that aloneness, that realization that I'm here and you're there, and I don't know how we're going to meet, but that's where real intimacy comes from. And I've been wondering a lot recently about how what is it to bring that to the small moments, not just those big difficult conversations, but how do I live through that?
Yeah. I think what you're saying there is a very subtle point that is easily misunderstood within Buddhist practice in general or meditation practice specifically. That what intimacy will feel like is a oneness, and all kind of difficulty will disappear in the unification of everything. Now, if you practice meditation, there are times of that. That's wonderful, actually. There's a certain types of concentration that arise through a meditation practice in which there is a unification of things, or the inseparability of things is seen directly, and there's a great ease in that. But that can make us dull if we grasp it. So this is the tricky thing. We might have those experiences seeing in that way, but if we grab those experiences and use them as a justification or an underpinning or a basis for how we operate, we get lost in what's called the dark chamber of emptiness. You kind of get you get lost in a kind of indifference. You might even think it's not indifference because everything's connected, but you don't know actually how to meet anything. So that's why it's so tricky, because there is a part of practice which that's really important. But by not grabbing that inseparability, what we find is our being is animated, and it's animated to meet. It's animated to meet many, many things. Because we're not separate from them, we can meet them. But the meeting is not going to feel like, oh, there's nothing there, we're just one. The meeting's going to feel like, oh my God, what do I do with you? You're a wild being that's completely yourself. And I'm a wild being, which is completely myself. And they're really, the fact of our inseparability is our total selfness. And so that's challenging, right? It doesn't have the same kind of feeling of, oh, everything's just smoothed over type of unity. It calls us to some other kind of meeting. Now, we can study this in, right in meditation. So where we study it in meditation is the non-dismissive attitude of the intimate mind. So we use this word intimate, the closeness, the non-dismissive quality of that intimate mind. It means no matter what it is that we meet, there is no dismissal. There's no, you need to go now. And yet, there's also the recognition that it's nothing other than mind. Both of those are there together. So in the posture of Zazen, that's why in this school in particular, there's so little instruction. I don't know, you guys ever get frustrated with that? It's like basically no instruction. But there's a real reason for that. And that is because your dismissive mind is very, very fast to utilize any tool, even a very wonderful tool, to undercut that intimacy. And even that is not essentially a problem. It just won't work forever. Right? It might help you for a while, but then you'll see through it in some way. So the process unfolds. Anyway, for all of you, a recommendation about that in terms of meditation, studying it is starting next month. Jikie will be leading a circle that's exploring this through the practice of Zazen. And so a circle is people meet once a week and they talk about their experiences in Zazen and then think about what is it to study that. These deep questions that arise if we're facing life with kind of, I was going to say facing life seriously, but I don't mean seriously. I mean like with real intention, it includes joy. So I'd encourage you to look at that if you're interested in that kind of exploration. So I think it's two sections that are 5 weeks each or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, great.
So I've been writing songs my whole life, and I feel like that is as I'm getting older, I'm realizing it's just an exploration of myself. Your talk reminded me of a line I have that goes like, I am the tear you couldn't hold back no more, and now you know emotion is a magical door. And it reminds me of what my aunt used to tell me when I was growing up. I have big, strong emotions, but they're superpowers. So I was just asking your thoughts.
Hallelujah. 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 Lucky you to have such a wise aunt. Yeah. No, I think emotion is one of the very tricky things for us because it's like a double-edged sword, right? It has a capacity to do harm, it has a capacity to preserve and to help, it has a capacity to bring us forward, it has a capacity to confuse us. But I think in our we have this kind of grasping after order, particularly within regard to young people, in which emotion has become really, we abuse emotion a lot. We try to say you shouldn't be, we try to undercut it in all of these ways, and then we don't find how it is to find a balance with our emotion. And because our emotion is that magical door, if we are willing to not dismiss it, but to step through again and again, then we can find our way with it. Which isn't to say that no matter what emotion we have, we should express it however we want, whenever we want to. That's not the point, right? The point is that the emotion is true. It's true in itself. It doesn't need anyone's affirmation for it to be true. It is true in itself. And if we, just like anything in the world that we accept as true, then we have to learn to care for it. And so what a wonderful way is to write songs. And do you find that in the writing the songs that those lines come through kind of spontaneously? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Yeah, yeah. So that's what I was going to suggest is that to find our way with spontaneity, is so well. It's being alive, right? Being alive is spontaneous. That's what it means to be alive. And so finding our way with that spontaneity, we have a lot of reinforcement to not be spontaneous. Do things how you're told, do the way you're supposed to, do all of those things. And so oftentimes when we come to spiritual practice, we're a little hungry for the directions, right? We're a little hungry for, well, could you just tell me if I did these 5 things, then it would all be okay? And actually there are 5 things you can do. Sit quietly once a day for some period of time. Take care of your breath. Be generous to other people. Stop for a few moments before you have an impulse to do something, right? And offer incense to the image of your own inspiration. Incense, food, fruit, whatever it is, cigarettes, but make offerings. Okay, there's more, but those are 5 I will say this morning. It's actually all those practices are totally free. Because the reason they're totally free is because they're encouraging you to bring your spontaneous heart to whatever that activity is, And so I'm glad to hear that you found that doorway of the spontaneity, because if you can find it with the words, through emotion and the spontaneity of the words, then you can find that same doorway of spontaneity in quietness. You can find the same doorway of spontaneity in the way that you respond to another being. And that doorway of spontaneity is so intimate. It's risky, but exactly. And nothing risked, nothing really is going to happen if we don't take a serious risk. Thank you. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So the dysfunction of boundaries, or lack of boundaries, or boundaries that are too tight, too separating, too isolating, all come from non-intimacy. They all come from our hearts hardening in some way. And sometimes it hardens in the direction of, oh, I know what this situation is. So I get to just not pay attention to there being any layers of boundaries in the relationship. So like, for example, oh, I know who you are, Reiko. Oh, I could just give you a hug. If I'm thinking, well, I know who you are, you're my friend, you're my student, so I could just give you a hug. And I cut off the sensitivity of what it would mean for us to hug. Now I've crossed a boundary, whether you welcome the hug or not. I'm just using hugging because it's kind of an easy way to, all of us have probably experienced, whether you're a hugger or not a hugger, you've experienced the conundrum of hugging, I'm sure. So in that moment, you may even be fine with it, but you may have lost your sensitivity to the sensitivity to each other. So in that embrace, is there some boundary being crossed? I mean, that happens even before there may be, like, the person who hugs everybody who doesn't really want to hug. Do you know this person? Are you this person? That's happening, right? So what I'm saying there is that boundaries all get ignored, or the boundaries kind of disappear from some people's mindset because they've hardened a part of themselves. The hardening is not necessarily like a person wants to be brutal. The hardening can be like love, right? Oh, I love you. And so I just want to, but I'm not really activating the not knowing of intimacy to stay intimate, to stay aware of what's happening. If I am, then all of the things that are unfolding there are attuned to. And does that mean that a boundary would never get crossed? No, it doesn't mean that. But it means that's where the healthy boundary can grow, because there is that recognition of the intimacy. Right? And the same thing when boundaries are too rigidly set up and maintained, that we don't want to deal with something. Or maybe there's a dysfunction in the boundary because other person can't see there's supposed to be a boundary there, or they don't care that there's supposed to be a boundary there. And then we harden, we make a wall and we harden it. And even though that person's not on the other side, we're still holding up the wall, because we're afraid, really. And so we need some therapeutic environment in which we can start to undo that wall and find out, how do I put up the wall when it's needed and let the wall be down when the wall's not needed. This all happens deep in our being, but it happens in our refuge in each other, our investment in each other. If we don't invest in each other means not just humans, but all beings. If we don't invest in each other, then we don't know about those. We don't ever find those boundaries. And we can see that as it's covering, like if we take environmental degradation, for example, it's not that we could never build a house from wood and stay in right alignment. We could, but what we did is we created forests, and those on our head. Already, when we created a forest, we already cut down the tree, and not just cut down the tree, but we killed the tree. Cutting down the tree is not necessarily killing the tree, if it's in the dynamic of our interbeing. So we have a lot in our society now that's that way, and then that kind of brutality finds its way into our lives, and we treat each other that way, and causes a lot of pain. What are you thinking? I'll leave you with one last thing. Nathaniel, you had asked me about my mom, and this is an exercise I would recommend to people. Sometimes people who are close to you, people that you care about, think about how are they your Dharma teacher? What have they taught you? Because of course they're Dharma teachers that have a label of a Dharma teacher, and they do Dharma teachery sorts of things, and that's important. We need that, but it shouldn't be to the exclusion of finding out how many, many, many beings, actually all beings and things, are your teacher. So to pick up that practice of finding out, how is this person my Dharma teacher, and very specific, like what are they teaching you? And so if I think about that with my mom, sitting with her in the hospital and thinking about how, really I have a wonderful family. And that doesn't just come from nowhere, right? I used to get really angry when people say, "Oh, you have such a wonderful marriage," and I was like, "It's hard work." I didn't just get a wonderful marriage, right? I mean, I got a wonderful wife, and so that helped. But it's a lot. It's hard work, right? To really have a good marriage, and I can see in my family, it was really hard work for my parents to cultivate this family that we have. So I was sitting in the hospital with her, and I got it. She never leaves. She's there. She stays present, and she's done that for me since I was, well, right? And that quality that she has to that there's no leaving, which doesn't mean there's no boundaries. She's actually quite good at boundaries. And but that continuity is there. And she taught me this in many, many ways. But one of the ways, which I've told this story over and over again, this will be the story I write down about my Bodhisattva mother. What she taught me was when our daughter Anzu was a baby, and I became a father just a month after turning 21. And I was so happy to be a father, and I really loved children. I'd done a lot of babysitting and stuff, so I wasn't totally like, "Oh, what is this kid? I don't know how to change diapers or whatever." That wasn't the issue. But still, 21, and we were at my parents' place, and Anzu she must have been maybe 6 months old or something like that, and she was wailing at the top of her lungs, and she just wouldn't settle down, and you're trying to figure that out as a new parent, like, how do I console you, right? Which equals, how do I make you stop crying, right? That's what you're thinking. But actually, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. And my mom knew that. She had raised kids and, and really had that. And I can still see it. I was in the living room and I'm trying to get Anzu to calm down, trying to get her to calm down. And my mom was in her room maybe reading or something. And she came out and she just walked across and she came over to me and she just took on, she didn't say anything. She just took Anzu. And then she walked back into her room, and a little bit like the end of The Godfather, that scene where you're looking through the door there and they're in the other thing. She didn't close the door, okay? So I got to see it. And she goes into her, and she's holding Anzu, and the way that she was holding her, and just, those of you who have babies, this touch like this boom, boom, which says, you're going to cry as long as you're going to cry. And my job is not to convince you otherwise. My job is just to be there. And I could just see it. It was like a transmission. I could just see, oh, that's my job as a father. But then I could see, oh no, that's my job as a human being. So I offer that to you. And after service today, I'll be headed back up north and see my mom. Well, thank you for receiving, my worry. Is helpful to me.